This morning we want to continue our study on serving like Jesus, or Lord, make me a servant. Lesson number 5, serving with wisdom and vision. It's neat kind of how this particular lesson fell. When you talk about serving with wisdom, it's graduation season. Diplomas have already been awarded. As I said to 2 of our college graduates, we'll have 3 of our high school graduates that will be receiving those in the next few weeks. And to get a piece of paper to say that you have completed a course of study, high school, college, technical school, or even some other program might, by virtue of that paper, have all the rights and privileges thereunto pertaining, meaning you had mastered a certain amount of information, classes, and other, assignments that due to your proficiency, the school, the program, whatever you were a part of, gave you that piece of paper and said, now you're qualified. Now you're able to claim, again, this diploma or this degree. And that completion might, in some people's minds, say, well, now this person is considered wise. But are they? Really all it's saying, of course, is that they have mastered some information. The choice on whether or not they take that information, the facts that they learned, the procedures, the skills that they acquired, whether they'll take all of that and utilize it properly and with discretion, that will then determine whether or not they are wise. So that question remains to be answered. There are a lot of people, and you know them, that are very, very intelligent as it relates to, again, a particular field of study. But when it comes to wisdom, they may be sorely lacking. I have a buddy, and you may think him to be out of line when he says this, but he says about his wife that she's brilliant, very intelligent in the particular area of study that she's given to her life too. He said, but she doesn't know when to come in when it's raining outside. And again, that's a little disparaging maybe, but there are people that have a lot of, we sometimes will classify it this way. They have a lot of book sense, but they don't have any what? Common sense. And Amy and I have another friend that Amy graduated high school with, and she actually works for the government, and that's just kind of a side note, but she's one of those people too. She's very intelligent, but as it relates to common sense or just working her way through simple scenarios, for many people, she might struggle. And I don't want to be disparaging of any of those people. I'm simply trying to say, when we come to God's Word, and when we come to this idea of serving with wisdom and vision, it's not just about having information. If it were just about acquiring information, then, our task would be much easier. Paul even mentioned some when he wrote to Timothy, some people in his day. He said they were always learning, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. That's a very serious indictment, and I don't think Paul made it lightly, but it's also a very sad commentary that may still be applicable even to some people today. They learn, they know, and you may very well have known individuals. I've known several in my life who, as it related to just if we want to say the facts of the Bible, the information about what the Bible taught, stories and episodes and, where things might be found, Old Testament, New Testament, or what section of Scripture, these people were very, very intelligent in that regard. They could recall that information with ease. But what was so heartbreaking about several of them is that they did nothing with it. It really did not impact their life. They didn't live by the information that the Bible teaches. And I remember one individual in particular, they would argue with other people about what the Bible might be teaching on a particular subject. And they would be right, at least as I remember the conversations and kind of overhearing them. They would be able to accurately say, this is what the Bible says, and this is what the Bible teaches, and this is what the Bible says to do. But They themselves were unwilling to do it. So did that information really benefit them? Not really, did it? In Acts chapter 7, serving with wisdom and vision, in verses 1 to 7, we're not going to take time to read either of these lesson texts this morning, but I think they're familiar to most of us. In chapter 6, the church, of course, has exploded with growth from the time that it had its start in Acts chapter 2 with the preaching of the gospel by Peter and the other apostles, the coming of the Holy Spirit. You remember all of that. 3,000 were obedient to the gospel and baptized into Christ that day for the forgiveness of their sins. You keep reading, the opposition to Peter and John and the other apostles by the religious establishment did not abate, but these men continued to show courage and said, whether it's right to serve God or men, you guys decide. And what a wonderful statement of wisdom that is. They were telling these learned, intelligent men, the Jewish council, those who were schooled in the Jewish religion of the Old Testament, they said, you know what God's Word says, but here's, an application of that information. Whether it's right in the sight of God to serve you or men, you have to decide. And then Peter says in Acts 5:29, we ought to obey God rather than men. No matter what you say, God's authority should be submitted to supremely. And what you desire, we're going to put that secondary. And so the church continues to grow. And like any organization, like any group, the larger it gets, the more potential there is for problems. And no doubt most of us have seen that in one form or fashion, maybe where you worked, or if you were teaching in a school, or if you were, whatever, a part of a team. If there's a group of people, there's going to be problems just because people have problems, and you get a lot of people together, you usually have a lot of problems. That's just the way that life is. And so in chapter 6, the problem as it opens is that there is a complaint that some of the widows who were not of a Hebrew nationality, that is the Grecians, or some versions say the Hellenists, they were complaining because their widows were being neglected. There was, at this point in church history, a need for daily benevolence, just probably the necessities of life, food and shelter and clothing and things of that nature. Because of the influx of everyone that had come to Jerusalem, most of them had stayed there. Now, they're going to be scattered because of persecution. Chapter 8 will inform us, and the end of chapter 7 as well. But these Grecian, that's another word for Hellenist, or those with a non-Jewish Hebrew background, they were being neglected. Now, there's no impression here that it was malicious, the omission or the oversight. But the 12, the apostles, said, this is a problem, but our task of preaching and teaching God's Word needs to supersede this administrative issue, almost as it were. This is an important need for sure, but still, we need to devote ourselves, the Bible says, to prayer and a ministry of the Word, to continue to preach and teach and pray. And so, very wisely, they said, select some men from among yourselves, those that would have acquaintance with maybe the culture, for instance, of these Grecian widows, have a greater appreciation for maybe the perspective that they would have. People that would be respected, men that would be respected by the group as a whole. And so 7 of these men are chosen, verse 5, and Philip is the most, or Stephen and Philip are the most prominent among them. Stephen will lose his life as a martyr, the first Christian martyr in chapter 7. For preaching, but then the problem is solved. There's a problem. The problem is evaluated. A wise course of action is considered and then prescribed and carried out. And with that vision, it seems that everything is resolved. Verse 7 of Acts chapter 6 said, "Then the word of God spread." It's a positive result. The number of the disciples multiplied greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests were obedient to the faith. So that's an example of serving with wisdom and vision. Going back to the ministry of Jesus, if you'll turn back to Matthew 25, our other lesson text by way of illustration is in the form of a parable. And you remember that Matthew 24 is parallel to Mark chapter 13. In Mark chapter 13, we talked about a few Sunday nights ago how it related to the destruction of the city of Jerusalem that Jesus said was coming, and in fact did occur in and around AD 70. But he also made promises about his second coming, or statements that would relate kind of to both events, and especially about his second coming and about the exact date of when Jerusalem would be destroyed. Jesus said, I'm not going to be able to pinpoint that for you. And remarkably, why that was the case, he said, of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. And that's a very interesting passage to study in detail. That's not our assignment this morning. But nevertheless, Jesus said, your task is to watch. And that's a repeated instruction. Watch. Be ready. And today, with the passing of nearly 2,000 years since Jesus spoke these words, many people have just kind of shrugged it off and said, well, it won't happen today. Jesus isn't coming back today. After all, He didn't come back yesterday or the day before or the day before or the day before. And you can insert how many ever years you've lived. I've lived this long. I don't think He'll come back today either. That's a dangerous assumption. There'll be people that will sadly make that dangerous, foolish assumption, and one day He's going to come back. Whether it's today or not, I don't know. Neither do you. But the instruction, of course, is to watch. And so in chapter 25, as our Bibles are divided, Jesus, after telling about this coming judgment, He gives a story. And sometimes we downplay the importance of stories. And we say, well, just give me the facts. But Jesus was a master at giving in story form, a principle that could be remembered and recalled by looking at the details of the story. And again, this one is a familiar one that we're not going to read word for word, but there were 10 young ladies, 10 virgins. Now, the cultural background of what's happening here seems a little bit odd to us. We think of the wedding, getting an invitation in the mail and saying, okay, the wedding's going to be on whatever date. I don't know if this is a Saturday. We'll just imagine that it is. June the 28th at 2 p.m. at, would just say such and such a place. And we think, okay, our RSVP, I send back in and say, I'll be there and I'll bring, the wife and kids, how many ever. And we think of just showing up maybe about 1:30 and, the music's already playing, everything's decorated nicely, and a guy back there wants to be an usher and say, which side do you want to sit on? If that's a big deal, the bride side, the groom side, and we just go in, have a ceremony, go downstairs, eat a piece of cake and some nuts. If it's a fancy affair, you might even have a bigger course meal. And then, by 5 o'clock, even if you stayed around that long, you're going to throw rice or sparklers or blow bubbles. You're going to do something, the happy couple, and they're going to drive off on the honeymoon. The wedding's over. That's it. Well, that's not what's happening in the first century world. The first century world, it was probably a week-long celebration. Now, I know those of you with daughters, you'd probably gasp, I'm already paying for one afternoon, it's bankrupting me. What do you mean, an entire week? Well, that's what they did. And what was interesting is that when the groom would decide, after a period of just festivities with his buddies, I know we say a bachelor party, that's not anything like what's happening in the first century world, today's modern equivalent. But if you can imagine, he's with his buddies. But at some point, the marriage started when the groom, we're not sure really at the behest of his father or the bride's father or what exactly. There's a lot about these details we don't understand. But at some point, he said, okay, I'm ready. And so he's going to go to get the bride. And there's one of two ways this could happen. One way, he could go and get her and take her back to his place and at his parents' house have the feast, or they could go to the bride's home and have the feast and the wedding ceremony and all the celebration there for a while. And that seems to be what's going on here. But the point is, it was very unpredictable as to when that would happen. But the bride has her, we might call them the bridesmaids, these 10 attendants of hers. And Jesus said 5 were wise and 5 were foolish. What made the difference? Was it their mental capacity? Was it that 5 had, graduated from a school there in Galilee or Jerusalem or somewhere that was more prestigious than those who were foolish? No, it has nothing to do with their intellectual capability. 5 were wise and 5 were foolish because Jesus said in verse 3, those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. They would have little clay, almost like, I get the impression when I go to Hobby Lobby, like a terracotta pot. And that's kind of what archaeology actually has dug up for us. Just little clay pots, a wick coming out of the top, filled with olive oil. And if you want to just do an experiment with your kids, you can make one very easily to illustrate that for them today, or your grandchildren. But these foolish ones had their lamps, and they had oil, but they had no oil in reserve. The wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. They had reserve. We might say they had spare batteries today if you were thinking about artificial illumination. The bridegroom was delayed. Maybe he was just having too much fun with his buddies. Whether he had cold feet, we're not told. They slumbered and slept, but at midnight the cry was heard, behold, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him. And so it would be a big festivity and kind of be a parade almost of sorts. And they would go out. And remember, there are no street lights. There are no flashlights. And so they had to take what they had. And these lamps was what they had to provide illumination. So they rose and trimmed their lamps, meaning they caused them to shine brighter. The foolish said to the wise, we've got a problem. We're out of oil. Well, the wise said, there's not going to be enough for us. We brought enough for our lamps, but you go get some more. You go buy and sell. I don't know if there's a 24/7 Walmart somewhere in the vicinity. Probably not, but they went to buy. The bridegroom came. Those who were ready, notice that, verse 10. Those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. It's a very, very picturesque way of describing it. And there was, in probably most of these homes, a courtyard-like area, a compound almost of sorts. And so the outer doors, the outer gates were shut. The other virgins who had went to buy additional oil came also saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered and said, I say to you, I don't know you. You're not on the list, the guest list. Yeah, maybe they argued we were. But those who were prepared were the ones who were able to enter, and those who were unprepared were not. It's a very simple story, one that would have probably carried more punch actually with the original hearers than it does with us, because again the cultural customs are different for us than they were for them. But here's the simple point that all of us can take away even 2,000 years later in Crossville, Tennessee this morning. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. You need to have wisdom and you need to have vision. Now, how does that relate to our serving? Jesus had these things in abundance. We're going to talk about this morning at the worship hour, the book of Proverbs, wisdom. And Jesus, according to the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 1 verse 30 and again in Colossians 2 verse 3, He'll be called the wisdom of God. And what that really means is if you want to know what it looks like to live a wise life, look at the life of Jesus. Imitate His life. And that's an important lesson for all of us, no matter our age. Certainly none of us can have the kind of wisdom or vision that rivals the Lord's, but the Bible still expects us to use these qualities in serving Him. And most all of us know and can point to incidents in our own lives maybe when we failed to serve with wisdom and vision, when we failed to make proper preparation in advance. And again, this might relate to, some of our personal, experiences. I remember from, I guess, as long as I can remember anything, my parents always telling me, you got to save some money for what? A rainy day. We've had a lot of rainy days lately, haven't we? Well, is he just talking about precipitation falling from the sky? No, they were talking about because they were children whose parents had lived through the Great Depression, and most of you have some acquaintance with that as well, who understood, times are going to be tough at some point or another. You're going to have to, call on your reserves. And if you don't have them, you're going to be in a bad spot. So you need to, save some money. Don't spend every penny of the paycheck. Put some back. And so most of us have tried to do that, I'm sure. And most of us have probably had times when we didn't do that as much as we should. And some of those tough times we found them, and maybe we had a little suffering as a result. Maybe the place that you work. You can look back and see, the guys in management. It may have been one of you who had that managerial responsibility, but the people that were charged or tasked with planning and showing vision and wisdom, they weren't prepared. And so you were caught flat-footed. Your competitor, outmaneuvered you, or something else happened to put you behind. That can happen. Certainly, it goes without saying that history is filled with examples of individuals and even nations that were caught off guard because of a lack of vision and wisdom and preparation. And some of them ultimately met their total demise as a result of that. Some of them bounced back. We were fortunate as a country, even though we were kind of caught flat-footed in some respects prior to the beginning of World War II, to have the wherewithal to be able to respond and rebound and win that great conflict. But that doesn't always happen. Well, let's think about these questions with what the Bible has told us already, as well as maybe some of your own personal sharing and comments. I'd welcome that. What is wisdom? What does wisdom really mean? I've thrown that word around all morning. What does wisdom mean? Do you have a good definition? What do you think? Here's the definition that I heard a long time ago, and I don't know who I heard it from first to give credit to, and I'm sure they heard it from someone even before that. Wisdom is knowing how a course of action will ultimately turn out. Wisdom is the knowledge of knowing how a course of action will ultimately turn out. I like that definition because it kind of combines that idea of vision with it. Someone says that wisdom is the skillfulness in knowing how to apply the knowledge that we have. Certainly, as that relates to Scripture, that would be in knowing the knowledge that God would have us to know so that He would be pleased by our proper application of it. The Hebrew word that the Old Testament uses is the word hokmah or hakmah. And the best that I can determine, that word means the practical, the practical ability to apply theory to practice. That is, I know something in theory, I know this fact, but now when I'm presented with a situation where that fact might come into play, what do I do with it? You've probably heard this little cliche, or the way that many people have illustrated it. A tomato is a what? Agriculture people. A fruit or a vegetable? It's a fruit. I know if you've not taken botany, you don't believe us, but it's true. I took botany. A tomato is a fruit, classified scientifically by botanists as a fruit. So you might say then that having knowledge that a tomato is a fruit, that's the fact. Wisdom is knowing that a tomato does not go where? In a fruit salad. Unless you're JC and he makes us good tomato pies for our, it's Ladies' Day, but he invites me and George and a few more of us to eat with it, but that's a separate thing. So wisdom is knowing that even though a tomato is a fruit, it does not belong in a fruit salad. Typically, if you like tomatoes in your fruit salad, go for it, but that's the way it's kind of illustrated. That's taking the practical knowledge that I have, the information, and putting it into practice. There's another Hebrew word that binah, that means the ability to discern intellectually between truth and error. The book of Proverbs that we're going to talk about, the worship hour, will oftentimes use that word. And wisdom is just looking at two things and saying, okay, what's right and wrong. And sometimes things are black and white, but sometimes there are things that are gray. And sometimes maybe even there's, a spectrum, if you will, of gray that we have to navigate through in life. And that's challenging, and we need God's wisdom to do that properly. The Greek word is Sophia. You may have known some lady by that name, but the Greek word is Sophia. and it is more broad. It kind of encompasses everything like knowledge, intelligence, the skillful use of reason, judicious thinking, logic, rationality. A lot of that comes under that umbrella term. And usually you have to take it and see how it's used in context with other words to really get to the heart of what the New Testament means by that word. So if that's wisdom, what is vision then? What is vision? Is it the same thing? Maybe not exactly, but it does have some similarities, doesn't it? The idea of looking ahead, foresight, seeing beyond today, trying to, think and say, if I decide to go down that road, where is it going to lead me? If I make this choice, what is going to be a likely outcome? And vision certainly relates to wisdom in that sense. I like to think of vision also as being something that's more proactive instead of reactive, visionary instead of reactionary. There are people who go through life, and all of us, again, from time to time, are like this just by, the nature of our weaknesses. We are reactionary. We just have to respond to whatever life throws at us, as we say. But a more effective way to live might be to try to be more visionary, to try to, instead of react, to be proactive as much as we can and have wisdom in that regard. Are there characteristics of true wisdom? If there are, what are they? Where can you find them? I'm thinking about going to the New Testament, and maybe you've read this before. James says in James chapter 3, beginning in verse 17, the wisdom that is from where? Above. So maybe the first characteristic of wisdom is its source or its origin, from above. And if you want to add further proof to that, just turn a page back, maybe in your Bible, to chapter 1 in the book of James and verse 5. And he said, if any of you lack wisdom, now if we pause there, that's not to suggest that someone reading that then or someone reading that today should boast and say, well, that's not me. It's meant to, of course, kind of put us all in the same boat, as it were. Any of you lack wisdom? Oh yeah, all of us lack wisdom. Some of us lack it more than others, I will say that. Some of you have wisdom that far surpasses mine, and I recognize that. But we all, to one degree or another, lack wisdom. So if you lack wisdom, what's James tell you to do? Ask who? God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given him. So wisdom is from above. Wisdom originates with God, back to chapter 3, verse 17. And that wisdom from above is then, he gives these qualities: pure and peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now, time will not allow us this morning to look at each of those characteristics in great detail, but we could probably spend one class on each point. Wisdom from above is pure. Well, what does that mean? Pure in its motive, pure in its intent. I think I've told you this before, but one of the things that I remember from one of the wisest people I ever knew, which was my maternal grandmother, when I would stay with her while my parents worked, and I would be staying with her in the summertime, I remember watching, I guess it would just be the news, or it might have been some other program, but whatever the case, they would report, the reporter would come on TV and they would talk about some crime that had been committed. You know, a bank had been robbed, or it was something more benign like that. There were no, to my knowledge, we didn't really watch that grotesque, type of stuff now where people are always trying to solve murder mysteries, but it was other stuff. It was like bank robberies and things of that sort. And, the bad guys were caught and whatever. And some of them, maybe it was one of those shows about dumb criminals. The guy goes into the bank and he uses his own deposit slip and he slides it across to the teller and says, this is a stick up and give me $1 million. And she gives him the money, and then he runs out, and she's left with his own deposit or withdrawal slip. So it's pretty easy to track him down and find that. And I remember telling my granny, that guy's so, and I use the word, that was so stupid. He should have got somebody else's deposit slip, right? That made a lot more sense. And I remember she said, you don't think like that. You don't use your mind to think about how to do bad stuff or something to that effect. And I guess that's what this idea of pure is. We don't think about how to do that which is impure. We don't use our wisdom in a way that would be, contrary to the will of God. We don't use our wisdom to promote conflict, but rather it's peaceable. Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. Some people that are wise, they just try to make peace by saying, I'm smarter than you are, so be quiet and do it the way I say to do it. But that's not really true wisdom either. Wisdom that is from God, that is from above, is gentle. There are some people that are very intelligent, but they're very smug and they're very arrogant. They're very condescending. They're very much anything but gentle. But the Bible says if I'm wise the way God wants me to be wise, I'll be gentle. I'll even be willing to yield. See someone else's perspective. I'll be merciful. I'll show good fruit. I won't be partial. I won't be hypocritical. So all of that are the true characteristics of wisdom. At the worship hour, we'll look very briefly at Proverbs chapter 8, where wisdom is personified. And it's amazing to see a connection that some people even think Proverbs 8 is referring to Jesus. I'll leave that for the worship hour, but that's just kind of something to think about as well. Well, what are characteristics of true vision? Much the same, I would think. Additionally, you might add that true vision involves faithfulness and courage, planning and preparation, prayerfulness. True vision is, understanding. The people perish. That's a good point as well. If I don't see the need, and again, I don't want to be discouraging, but maybe where, at least in my life, because of certainly the way that I've lived it and the work that I've done, the lack of vision sometimes within the church has just been terribly evident. And especially as it relates, for instance, to things like leadership. And one thing that we're trying to do here, that we're doing with any of our men that want to participate, and we have a good number that are doing it, our deacons and otherwise, is to make preparation now for future leadership opportunities. Because no one lives forever. No one lives forever. It's an ancient proverb. I don't know from what culture. I don't find it in Scripture word for word. But I remember as a very young man, again, running across or having someone share with me, our task in life is to build bridges that we never expect to cross. And I remember the first time I heard that, I scratched my head and I said, well, that's kind of silly. What in the world does that mean? But the longer you live, the more impactful that statement is. We're to build bridges that we never expect to cross. I'm the beneficiary. I can tell you that I've crossed a lot of bridges that others built for me. And I'm thankful. And I've tried and will continue to try to build bridges that my sons and others can follow behind me and cross, that I'll not cross myself. Well, if you turn to the back page, what about some application? As we try to serve, as we try to live for the Lord with vision and wisdom and doing that in our interactions with each other, serving with wisdom and vision involves imitation of the Godhead. In other words, being like God. Is God a planner? That's a trick question philosophically, by the way. Because God knows everything and has always known everything from the beginning to the end, you might say, well, God's not a planner in that sense because He doesn't have any past or present or future to look at. He just looks at the eternal present. Well, yeah, that's philosophical and that's deep and whatever else, but He describes it to us in language where, for instance, in Ephesians chapter 1, verses 4 to 7, Romans chapter 8, verse 29, those whom He foreknew. He describes it in the book of Revelation, Jesus as the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world. As it relates to our orientation to time, God has acted past, He acts in the present, and He'll act again in the future. That's the way we as finite physical creatures reckon with time. God is eternal. Time doesn't matter to Him. But to give us an understanding of the way He operates, yes, He's a planner. And I'm thankful that He was. Now, again, we get in trouble when we try to then ask questions like, well, if God knew that Adam and Eve would sin, why did He make them the way that He did? Don't let those questions, those types of things bother you. God has known all things from all time, but He has planned and He has made it possible for us. I mentioned Ephesians 1, beginning in verse 4. Let me just read that to you very quickly to show you what I'm talking about. God chose us in Christ before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and without blame before Him in love, having predestined us to adoption as sons by Jesus Christ to Himself, according to the good pleasure of His will. That is not information that says God is arbitrary in making a choice where some are saved and some are lost, irrespective of their free will. That's commonly affirmed in many religious traditions, but if you read the entirety of Scripture and even this context closely, you'll discover that it was God's plan through Jesus that people be saved, and all of those who choose to respond obediently to Him will be. And they have the free choice to do that or not. Well, serving with wisdom and vision involves an act of choice. It involves discernment. We have to distinguish between right and wrong with clarity and conviction. A lot of people want to go through life and just say, I don't want to make any choices. I just want to go with the flow. It's not possible, and certainly not in serving God. Serving with wisdom and vision involves a pattern of thinking. I remember, and I don't know, some of you have experience with maybe flight, but I remember when I lived in Meridian, Mississippi, the Navy trained their jet fighter pilots. After they got off props, they came to Meridian and got their first T-45, their first jet aircraft. And I remember one of the instructors, he was a member of the church, and he said, the very first rule in flying the plane is to do what? Fly the plane. And that, I remember him saying that, and I was like, what? He said more accidents happen, more aviators lose their lives. History has borne it out because they were doing something other than flying the plane. He said your only job as a pilot is to fly the plane. That's it. And if we would go through life, of course we're not all going to be pilots, but if we would go through life remembering that we live for the Lord, and the only task that we have primarily is to live for the Lord, everything else will fall into place as it should. Serving with wisdom and vision involves not showing partiality. This is from James chapter 3, you remember. That is, that we are, again, to be kind of that singular-minded. Serving with wisdom and vision involves a willingness to listen. The Bible talks about easy to be entreated, seeing another person's perspective. And that's true wisdom, that's true vision. And then finally, serving with wisdom and vision involves the willingness to accept criticism. I didn't want to put that one in there, but I felt like it was necessary. No one likes criticism, I don't think. But usually if you will welcome it, it actually makes it easier to bear. And that's something that I've tried to do. And I guess I say this with a little bit of pride. I've disarmed some people because they thought, well, if I get on him really good, then I'm going to make him mad. And maybe he'll respond, then I can get mad again. And then we can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I just try to tell people, thank you. I appreciate your help. I appreciate your concern. I won't always get everything right. Thank you for pointing out that I'm a human. So I'm going to listen, learn. I'm going to grow. And then what doesn't apply, I'm going to discard. I don't tell them that. But that's what I'm going to do. Well, that's serving with wisdom and vision. And we all need to think about how we can do that in our own lives individually. There's some things there in the discussion questions I'll leave for you, how you can do that individually, how church leaders should do that. You may say, well, I'm not a church leader. Well, help them with that. Pray for them to that regard. Look at that, the last one on the bottom left there, by parents. You may say, well, my children are already grown. I may be a grandparent, but what wisdom can you share? Maybe that sometimes we as parents may not be able to see as clearly. And then as individual Christians, if you want to write in just one final verse, 2 Corinthians 13:5 said, examine yourselves daily. I need to look at every aspect of my life and ask if it conforms with the will of God. And if not, change so that it is. Well, thank you for your good attention this morning in our class. We appreciate that very much. Come back next week. We'll look at lesson number 6, the Lord willing then.